Chris Hipkins, thanks very much for joining us. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
You've done a reshuffle of your portfolios. Jan Tinetti loses the education and women's portfolios, both of those areas she was a minister in. Did she fail as a minister?
No, if you look at the overall lineup now, largely people are in portfolios that they weren't in when we were last in government, and that's a deliberate move. You know, we're not asking for people to re-elect the last government that we were in 2023. We lost that. We're refreshing, we're renewing. So our lineup in 2026 needs to look different to what we went into the 23 election with.
Willie Jackson loses employment and he loses media. Did he lose media partly because of the botched merger with TVNZ and RNZ?
No, absolutely not. I've asked Willie to take on social development, which is a big portfolio, and he's still our spokesperson on Māori development. Those are two big portfolio areas. Reuben Davidson's coming up through the ranks in our caucus. He's got a background in broadcasting and media. I actually want to expand that out, so I've expanded the portfolio to be broadcasting, media and the creative economy, because there's huge opportunity for New Zealand. If you think about how well we've done in the screen sector, for example, with film and television, expand that out to gaming, expand that out to the other creative digital sectors, massive opportunity to create new jobs, new good, well-paying jobs in New Zealand in an area that's changing massively and quickly. So I want to put some new energy into that to really generate new ideas.
Is this the lineup that you will go into the 2026 election with?
Oh, I think, a year and a half, there's bound to be a few tweaks here and there, but yeah, I've largely got people where I want them to be heading into the next election campaign.
You told the Auckland Business Chamber, where this speech was announced, that, quote, we aren't going to spend our first year back in government pausing, cancelling and reviewing everything. So, surprise us. Which of the current government's policies are you going to hang on to?
I think there's a bit of a difference between rhetoric and reality sometimes, but if you look at what they're saying on infrastructure, we need a more stable infrastructure pipeline where we can actually just get ahead and build things, and the priorities don't always change every time there's a change of government. I actually agree with that approach. I think them coming in and cancelling, pausing, things like school rebuilds, hospital rebuilds, even some of the transport projects we had underway, that was hugely damaging for our overall economy. There's 13,000 fewer people working in building and construction today than there were on election day, and the government dialing back work in that area is one of the reasons for that. I don't think the country can afford to keep doing that. So I've said that, look, if they've got work underway, even if it's not necessarily stuff I would have put at the top of the list, if it's already underway, we'll keep it going, because I don't think the country can afford the stop-start mentality when it comes to things like infrastructure. So I actually do agree with what the government are saying in that area. Unfortunately, their actions don't match that, but if they follow through, then so will we.
Let's talk about the economy. Will you campaign on a capital gains tax?
We'll campaign on tax reform, and what you heard me say today, now the exact nature of that, it's not just a simple issue of this one tax or that one tax. I think the issue that we're trying to address here is we've got to rejig the tax system so that the burden of taxation is more evenly spread, bearing in mind is, we've all got a responsibility to contribute to the prosperity and well-being of the country. And at the moment, the tax system does reward speculative investment, things like going and buying rental properties, more and encourage more of that than investing in productive businesses that create jobs. And that does need to change.
So you will campaign on a capital gains tax. I mean, you don't need to give us the details, but you have spent years and years and years looking at that. Surely you can tell New Zealanders today that yes, we will campaign on a capital gains tax. I'll tell you the details later. But surely the time has come for you just to say, you're going to do it.
We're going to be announcing our tax policy this year. I know that people want to have plenty of time to think about that. And yes, it will be a rejig of the tax system. But
I'm not asking you.
But the important question is, Diana, not just what new tax we'll have, but where will that money go?
Yeah, I'll decide what the important questions are
Fair enough.
For today. And my question is, will you campaign on a capital gains tax?
I'm not answering that today because we haven't locked down our policy on that. And included in that will be consideration of if we introduce any new taxes, where the money will go for
we'll talk about that in a second, but who's driving this policy? I mean, are you in charge of this party?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And do you want to go ahead with a capital gains tax? That's a pretty easy question.
It is.
And what's the answer?
I'm telling you, I'm not going to give you the answer today because I'm not announcing our tax policy today. I know everyone's obsessed about tax. Certainly the current government are obsessed about tax, but tax, not all roads lead to tax. Whatever you decide on tax, and this is the reason why I'm not answering it today, whatever you decide on tax has to fit within a broader economic plan that includes where that money goes if you're raising new tax revenue. Where does it go? Does it go to offsetting, i.e. reducing taxes in other areas, or does it go to new spending? And those are pretty fundamental questions.
And we can unpack some of that as we go. But you are going to campaign on tax reform. You told me
Absolutely.
that.
Yep.
Okay, so there will be changes to the tax system, not just the income tax rates.
That's correct. Absolutely.
Okay,
the structure of our tax system.
We are getting somewhere, aren't we?
Well, you are getting somewhere. Look, the structure of our tax system, if you look around the world, New Zealand's quite unique in the sense that the vast bulk of the government's tax revenue comes from income tax or GST.
And is that fair?
And
is it fair?
No, I don't think it is fair.
Okay, and what are you going to do about it?
Well, we'll announce that in a few months.
But is it fair if I work as a cleaner and get $60,000 a year, I pay tens of thousands of dollars in tax to the government, and if I flick an investment property, I pay zero tax? Is that fair?
No, I don't think that's fair.
And are you going to do something about that?
Yes.
Okay, well that's pretty much a capital gains tax, isn't it?
I'm not announcing our tax policy today, but you get the direction of travel. We do want to see that speculative investment, speculative decisions that are paying their fair share of tax. The people making their money off that activity are paying their fair share of tax. But in other areas, we actually want to encourage more of certain things. We want to encourage more savings. We want to encourage more investment in businesses and in productive enterprise that actually creates jobs for Kiwis.
Okay, can you rule out a wealth tax?
Oh, as I've said, I'm not announcing our tax policy today.
So that was quite a split with Labor last time, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, and we're working through that along with the team.
You don't support the wealth tax, do you?
Look, I'm not announcing our tax policy today.
I'm asking you to not to announce it, but to rule that out.
Oh, as I've said, we'll announce our tax policy in due course. It will be this year.
You need time to bed it in before an election, don't you?
That's right, and that's why I've said we'll announce it this year. And also, you need time to basically, counter the misinformation that often goes with tax changes. And so that's why I've said that we'll do it this year.
Do you think the appetite is there now? We've seen some heavy hitters come out in support of it. The head of the largest bank, the Treasury, the World Bank, the IMF. It's hard to find someone with mana in economics who doesn't support it.
Oh, I'm glad that you think the current Minister of Finance doesn't have any money in economics. I agree with you.
No, I didn't say that.
No, but actually the only people who seem to be vociferously arguing against changes in this area, in this broad area, are the people who make up the present government.
Let's talk about another couple of economic issues before we move on. Labor had a dual mandate for the Reserve Bank where they targeted inflation but also looked at employment. National's gone, okay, only going to fixate on the inflation number. Are you going to bring the dual mandate back? Would that be your intention?
Haven't made decisions on that. Actually, if you look at the analysis of whether the mandate was still there or not there, the argument over the last 5 years, the conclusions that I've seen over the last 5 to 10 years is that it didn't really make much difference either way.
So you're not too fussed about it?
So at the moment I'm reasonably ambivalent about that, but we haven't finalised our policy on that yet.
Do we deserve to know why Adrian Orr resigned?
Yes, I think we do. I have a lot of respect for Adrian Orr, and in fairness to him as well, he was leading the Reserve Bank through a really, really challenging period globally. High inflation and therefore high interest rates is not just something that's hit New Zealand, it's hit economies around the world.
A couple of more economic issues. The interest deductibility for landlords, the landlords tax breaks as they're colloquially known, $3 billion nearly on that. Yeah. Are you going to bring them back?
I think that completely, that's one of the reasons why we're working through our tax policy carefully, because if we were to do something in the capital gains tax area, then of course that has a bearing on what we would do around things like interest deductibility. Those two debates are absolutely linked. So those are the issues that we're working through. What we did do, I think this was misunderstood though, is we still had financial incentives through the tax system for people to build more houses. So if you were a landlord and you wanted to build more houses, you still got interest deductibility on those things. If you're buying existing homes though, we did change the tax system so that it didn't incentivise that. And that's because we want first home buyers to be in the front of the queue for buying existing homes. Will
you bring back the ban on oil and gas exploration?
Again, we haven't made a final call on that, but ultimately, I don't support the removal of it, so that probably gives you a fairly big, a big hint in that direction. And I don't think that oil and gas exploration is part of New Zealand's energy future. We have such an abundance of renewable energy. Renewable energy actually has the potential to provide us with cheaper energy, and that's going to be better and more economically competitive for New Zealand to do that.
So that's a yes?
Well, more or less, yeah.
So you would reintroduce them?
Well, we have said that. We have said that we're absolutely opposed to the removal of it.
Okay, let's move into trade and defence and security. Donald Trump, depending on which day it is, the tariffs are going to be on Mexico. There are tariffs which are being talked about being implemented worldwide. Some of those could hit New Zealand. If New Zealand is hit by US tariffs, should we respond and hit back?
No, I don't think New Zealand is going to be in New Zealand's best interest to be engaged in a constantly escalating tariff war.
So we should turn the other cheek?
Well, it's not going to be in our best interest to start applying tariffs on goods that are coming into New Zealand. I think it's...
So even if the US hits us, you wouldn't hit back?
Well, the US has been one of our fastest growing export markets. I don't think we can be blind to the fact that tariffs are likely to affect New Zealand exporters going into the US, but we should be true to our values. New Zealand has often stood apart in terms of our commitment to free trade internationally. It has actually been very good for New Zealand to have that position, and I think we should continue to maintain it.
Do you think that Phil Goff should have been sacked for what he did in terms of asking whether Donald Trump understood history?
Now, I've seen the video now. I hadn't seen the video the other day, and I do think he overstepped the mark in terms of what you would expect from a diplomat. Bearing in mind, he's not a politician, he is a diplomat. A politician saying those remarks right now in the current context, I don't think would bat an...
He's not a diplomat to the US though, is he? He's a diplomat in London.
Yeah, but you still have to behave in a diplomatic way. So I think he overstepped the mark. You could ask me the question, if I was the Prime Minister and it was John Key making those remarks, would I rebuke him for doing so? Yes, I would. Would I completely remove him from his job? I'm not sure that I would go that far.
So and this isn't a criticism, but you've changed your mind, because I heard you a little bit earlier in the week saying
Well, I hadn't actually seen the full context of it. I hadn't actually seen the video, so I've now seen the video.
You wouldn't have sacked him?
I'm saying I would. I'm not. Ultimately, it's Winston Peters' judgment, but I'm not sure that I would have gone that far.
Are you worried that we're in a world where people are just so scared of saying anything about Donald Trump?
Yes, I think New Zealand should continue to stand up for New Zealand's values. And a lot of what Donald Trump is promoting are the total opposite of the things that New Zealanders care about. If you want an open economy, if you want, a trusting democracy, if you want an inclusive community, these are things that are important to New Zealanders. And, many of the things Donald Trump's doing are going against those.
Is straight talking important to New Zealanders?
Yes, I think it is, yeah.
Do you trust Donald Trump?
Look, I've said that I'm avoiding that question. I still have a responsibility to be a little diplomatic.
Do you see the irony in your last two answers?
Yeah, but I still have a responsibility to be a bit diplomatic. You've got a guy in
the White House who's completely happy to speak his mind, and people are responding to that, resonating to that. But they want, as you've just told me, they want straight talking from their politicians.
Yeah, I don't think insults are going to be the answer to that.
I didn't ask for an insult. I asked whether you trust.
Well, when you start saying that you don't trust someone, you're kind of getting into personal territory. I think New Zealand.
Well, you're quite happy to say that about a lot of New Zealand politicians.
I think New Zealand. Well, they're my opponents, but ultimately, I don't have to work closely with them in the way that we'd have to work with whomever the United States chooses to elect. But New Zealand's independent foreign policy means we shouldn't be afraid on issues rather than personalities. We shouldn't be afraid to disagree, including with our friends. And the United States is still one of our closest friends. We shouldn't be afraid to disagree with them.
You've said no to AUKUS, Pillar 2 of AUKUS, the non-nuclear military sharing agreement. If National signs up in the next, remaining months in office, would you pull out?
That's a hypothetical question. I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, if you look at what the AUKUS partners themselves have said, they don't think that that's in any way imminent. There's no decisions about that imminent.
Yeah, but if we were part of it, would you actually take that step of pulling out?
Well, I think it's highly unlikely that things are going to get to that point. I mean, the three parties in AUKUS at the moment, the US, the UK and Australia, I think are still grappling with what the change in administration in the US means for the partnership that the three of them have signed up to. I think the idea that anyone else would be joining that at the moment is quite a distant question.
Couldn't we be left behind in terms of military technology if we don't get involved with something like this? I mean, if you look at Ukraine, something like 70% of the deaths and injuries on that battlefield are from drones. Now, who knows what the next iteration of military technology is going to be, but you would doubt that New Zealand will be building it themselves and would have the capability to be engaging in that sort of technology. Don't we risk being left behind?
Well, let's be clear about New Zealand's position here. We've got to be eyes wide open to the fact that we're living in a very volatile and much more risky world. But is joining an arms race the best way for New Zealand to confront that reality? No, I don't think it is. We do need to be considering what the kind of Defence Force capability New Zealand needs for our future is. And yes, we're going to have to spend more money on that. If you look at our naval fleet and various other things, we're getting to the point where we've got some big decisions coming. We also have to ask the question, if there is international conflict, if there is a need for New Zealand to play a role in that, what's the best role that we can play? But also including, looking at our own geography and the fact that we're often going to be a long way away from those conflicts. So we have offered land-based forces to other international conflicts, most recently in Afghanistan, for example. And New Zealand needs to be aware that we may be called upon to do that again in the future.
Should we be targeting 2% of GDP for defence spending? The Prime Minister's indicated that we should be moving in that direction. Does he have your support on that?
He has our support in terms of looking at what we need in our military capability.
Yeah, but that's
it'll cost what it costs, and it won't be even all the time. So if you look at it, for example, under Labor, defence spending went up significantly. Why did it go up? Because we had to replace the Orions, which were almost, I think they were older than me. So were the Hercules. We replaced them. That meant there was a big lump in the spending. That's the nature of a small military, which we have. It's going to be a bit lumpy.
So you don't think it's useful to target a 2% of GDP number or something like that?
No, I think the question is, what do you need? What's the capability you need and how much does that cost, rather than how much should you spend?
What would be at the top of your list?
It's certainly the naval fleet. We've got to look at what kind of capability we need there. The frigates are going to have to be replaced at some point. We're going to have to make decisions on that in the next decade. And whatever we do there, we're going to need to get some bipartisan agreement on that, because it's going to, you're talking about over a decade, 2 decades, it's going to span multiple governments. We have to work constructively together. We've got to look at the gaps in what we've got in our naval fleet. For example, we don't have any icebreaking capability, yet we're right on the Southern Ocean. Should that be part of our naval fleet capability? So these are the kind of strategic conversations we should have, and I don't think they should be a political football. I think the country's too small for this sort of stuff to be a political football.
Are you committed to Five Eyes?
Yes.
Why?
It's really important to New Zealand's security that we're part of those intelligence sharing operations. That doesn't mean we can't disagree with the other partners in the Five Eyes, and we do regularly.
You've got a National Director of Intelligence in the US, Tulsi Gabbard. You'd be happy for information intelligence sharing into that environment?
There's still protections around what intelligence we share through that existing arrangement. I'm very mindful always when I talk about this of not wanting to give too much away, or not wanting to give away information that I shouldn't. But I am confident that there's a robustness in that Five Eyes country, with our 5-country relationship around the Five Eyes, and that it's still in New Zealand's best interest to be part of it.
Let's finish talking about what it might look like if you were to return to the Treasury benches. Is your preference for a Labour, Green, Te Pāti Māori government?
My preference is to get as many votes for Labour as I possibly can. And let's be clear, it's MMP. The stronger the biggest party in government is, then obviously the less you have to give away in negotiations. So I want to get as big a support for Labour as I possibly can. But is coalition or support party arrangements, are they a reality under MMP? Yes, of course they are.
Sure.
Could we work with the Greens? Yes. Can we work with Te Pāti Māori? Yes, we can.
Is that your preference, those two parties?
I'll set out my position on that close to the election. Partly that's going to depend on what kind of things they decide to prioritise in their election campaign. So it will make a difference. I've already said, for example, in the case of Te Pāti Māori, one of the proposals they put up and said was going to be a priority for them is not something that we would agree to. I'm not going to agree to having a commissioner overturning the laws that are passed by a democratically elected parliament, but we're open to more checks and balances on what the parliament can do.
Is that your preference, though, for a Labour, Green, Te Pāti Māori coalition?
I think the closest working relationship we've got at the moment is with the Green Party. The relationship we have with Te Pāti Māori is an evolving one.
Could you appoint their MPs as ministers?
In terms of the Greens?
No, the Te Pāti Māori.
I think that's still, we're still a way off having to even make judgments on that. And again, it's going to depend partly on the position they take going into the election campaign.
Would you work with Winston Peters?
I ruled that out at the last election, and I have said that I think it's unlikely that that's going to change. I think if you look at some of the proposals they're putting forward, another one today, which is basically about divisive, sort of anti-identity politics, I just don't think that's the sort of stuff that we should be getting into.
So the speculation has been that you might be warming and there might be olive branches issued their way. That's wrong.
Well, I mean, I think if you look at something like Foreign Affairs, Winston Peters is the Minister of Foreign Affairs. I think it's in the country's best interest for us to try and have a cooperative working relationship with him in that area. So in areas like the Pacific, for example, we've got a very strong team of Pacific MPs. He's involved them in the work that he's doing around the Pacific. I welcome that, and I've indicated to him we want to continue with that cooperation. Whether that means that we would then suddenly turn around and say we're going into a government, I think people are drawing a very long bow if they leap to that conclusion.
And you're not going to work with them then, are you?
Look, I've said that I'll set that out closer to the election, and it will be based on what kind of pitch other parties take into the election campaign.
Is this your last shot?
No, I'm intending to win, and then I'll be running again multiple times.